Hi there guys, I'm Adam, this is Unlimited Films, and today we're going to be doing another film review. This one will be for Gemini Man, starring not one, but two Will Smiths. This film is what I'm going to term a realistic sci-fi film, and you'll discover why later in the review. As always, I'm going to run through the plot, some key characters, and some other themes. So we've got our notes, we're comfortable, we're ready to go, so let's just crack on. So first of all, I'm going to discuss the plot like I always do. So Will Smith plays Henry Brogan and Junior. So Henry is the older Will Smith, Junior is obviously the younger one. And basically the film starts with Henry Brogan on the side of a hill looking at a train. This is where we first see his sharpshooter skills. I'm going to try and keep it pretty spoiler free, just because this film's quite new, but this is where we sort of first see his sharpshooter skills. After this part of the film, Henry decides to retire. He says enough is enough, I've got 72 kills, I'm 51 years old, I don't want to do this anymore. He tries to retire. However, his old army friend Jack Willis then gets in touch with him and invites him out to his boat. He goes out to the boat and receives some information that actually the man he killed might not be the man they said he is. It's true that the name is the same, but his occupation is different. Henry gets told that he's a terrorist. Actually, he's a bioengineer for a company called Gemini. And this is where the Gemini Man thing comes into it, because we then get to see the story of why has he been instructed to kill somebody who works for a private organisation that has a large amount of contracts with the government. And that's sort of where the film... That's the storyline of the film that we get taken down. After this piece of information is given, this is really where the story begins. So the information leads to the death of Jack Willis. That's a small spoiler, he's not a major character, he's sort of just in it to give us one piece of information. And this is where the government then starts coming after Henry, because he knows that he's been sort of misled, double-crossed, and as their best soldier ever, they obviously can't really have that because they know he will discover the truth and that he could destroy their reputation and unveil what the Gemini project it really is. They obviously, because he's such a super soldier, they fail to kill him, and he actually saves this woman called Danny in the process. Now she's the person who's been sent to spy on him in his retirement, and he decides that actually if he's going to get killed, they're going to try and kill her as well because they're seen as loose ends. And so he goes to her house and saves her, and they both run away together. When the government fails to kill him, the Gemini project is set upon him. Gemini is run by a man called Clay Verris, who was actually Henry's sergeant. I'll discuss him in more detail later. He does have quite a big role in the film, sort of as the villain of the film, obviously along with Junior, but I'll discuss him a bit more later. So obviously, like I said, they set Junior on him. Henry flees to Colombia to find his friend Baron, who is another military man, and he basically flies them from place to place. Now in Colombia is where we first see Junior's skills put into action, and this is the first time that the two wills meet really. Colombia is basically just one big 10-minute fight scene. If you love action scenes, it's one of the best I've seen all year, to be honest with you. Lots of motorcycle chasing, lots of guns, lots of explosions. It's got it all, to be honest. But like I say, Colombia's not really that story heavy, just one big fight scene. After that happens, they see each other for the first time. They are flying to Budapest because this is where the man is who has the information on the Gemini project. And upon that plane, they realised the similarities between Henry and Junior. Now originally, Danny, who is the agent who has fled with Henry, wonders if it is his child. Could he had a child that he didn't know about? He's adamant it's not the case. He says, no, that's impossible, I can't have had a child. So when they arrive at Budapest, she does a DNA sample, and this is where we get told that they are not father and son, but they are the exact same person. It's his clone. And that's sort of the sci-fi element of this film. It's a clone, but it's very much other than that in the modern day world. So it's trying to make it believable, and that's why I said it was a realistic sci-fi film, because it's sort of like you could believe that the cloning could happen, because obviously we've cloned a sheep, obviously cloning a person is a bigger step up, but they do make reference to Dolly the sheep. I think trying to make it more realistic and bring it into our world. So then when in Budapest, he does meet Yuri Kovacs, who explains the Gemini project to him and explains why the man that he killed had to die. And it basically runs along the line of that he had worked out how to alter human DNA and make an even better version of Junior. So rather than it just being a clone, you could alter human DNA so they don't feel pain, they have no emotion. So they're almost like super soldiers, which is obviously dangerous. However, he then felt that it wasn't right to go on, so he tried to flee back to Russia, and they said, we can't have you taking that information back to the Russians and making them an army of super soldiers. And so instead they just killed him. So they then fight again in Budapest. This is mainly because Henry tries to set up Junior, and it kind of goes wrong. He uses Danny as bait, and Junior doesn't take it, and Junior basically holds a hostage against Henry. However, he doesn't realise that Danny and Henry have been in secret communication all the time, so Henry manages to avoid his trap, and they end up in another fight scene in the catacombs of Budapest. Bit creepy, pretty cool, lots of night vision, lots of in the dark stuff, and basically in the end Junior wins this one. To be fair, he kind of wins the one in Colombia as well, but he wins this one because he basically drowns Henry, which is Henry's greatest fear. And Junior obviously knows that because he's got the same fear, because they're the same guy. So he drowns him. However, he does get a wound from Danny as she shoots him, so that he lets Henry go so that she can save Henry's life. Sort of returning the favour after he saved her life right at the beginning of the film. However, this is where maybe a few little spoilers are going to come in. I'm going to try and keep it pretty spoiler free, but this is pretty much direct to the plot of the film. Henry has managed to get through to Junior, and Junior then begins to decide that actually he doesn't want to just be this military man that he's seen Henry be. He decides that, like Henry tells him, he does have a way out. He has a chance to escape the military life and live a normal life. Upon Junior's realisation of this, he decides to intercept Henry on his way back to the US. He does this when basically they land. He knows that Henry's been tracked the whole time, and so he intercepts him and shoots Henry in the neck with bee venom, which is his greatest allergy. Now, when I say bee venom, I don't mean some big sci-fi thing. I literally mean like a bee, like the little insect type venom, and that is his greatest allergy. And Junior knows this because it's also his greatest allergy, because they're the same person. Now, it's a great little piece of acting where he's choking and dying and all that stuff, but what I find weird about this is the way that he chooses to gain Henry's trust, by then saving him with the EpiPen that he has on him. I don't know if that's really the way I would go about gaining somebody's trust, sending them to near death and then saving their life, but it seems to work. And from this point on, they decide to sort of help each other to try and destroy the Gemini project and destroy Clay Varys. Now, I don't want to give too much away about the following scenes, because this is where the film sort of all comes together, and this is where the spoilers begin to happen. But there are a couple of things that I will point out, and these are sort of little spoilers, so I just want to warn you about that. So the first one is that basically right at the end of the film, sort of near the end of the film anyway, we do see a super soldier, and he takes on Danny, Henry and Junior all together, and he's basically been made from Henry's DNA again, but he's had all of the human elements removed, so he is a super soldier, feels no pain, has no emotion. And we see this actually in the film when he gets set on fire and he just keeps fighting. He's absolutely not bothered by the fact he's going up in flames. He is hard as nails. They do defeat him, however, and then we have this sort of like 5-minute standoff between Junior, Clay, Henry and Danny. And this is sort of where the film comes together, really, obviously. And what we see here is that actually Henry wants Junior to have the life he never managed to have. And this is because Clay is stood right in front of Junior, and Junior decides that he's going to kill Clay. Clay has to die. And Henry says to him, you know, if you pull that trigger, something will break inside of you and you can never, ever go back to living a normal life. You will throw every chance that you currently have away. And Junior sort of is like, but he needs to die. He's done too much bad. If the Gemini project is allowed to continue, it's going to destroy lives. And in the end, Henry decides that he can see how much it's aggravating Junior, and so he convinces Junior to give him the gun. He says, you know, give me the gun, don't destroy your life. And then basically, a spoiler alert, but quite an obvious one, I think we can see where this is going, he kills Clay for him and says, you know, my life is already full of ghosts and trauma. Yours can still be an enjoyable life. And after this, we fast forward 6 months later, and basically Junior's in college, and we have a few scenes of like a bit of a laugh, bit of banter, joking around between the two characters, and that's basically where it resolves. And we see that Junior finally gets to live the life that I think Henry always wanted but could never bring himself to have, because he was too scared that, you know, people wouldn't like him. He never wanted to let anybody in. He never had any real trust, and therefore he just takes the military route of being a solo warrior, a sharpshooter, never having to let anybody too close to him. And he tries to instill upon Junior the importance of actually letting people in. And he does end up with some really good friends in the end, because obviously he has Junior as a great friend, and Danny becomes a great friend as well. So that's sort of the plot. Like I said, I tried to keep it pretty spoiler free, tried to keep it pretty light, but I did put in the warnings as well. So the key characters, just to go into a bit more depth on who they are. Henry Brogan, he's obviously the older version of Will Smith, as discussed, and he's basically just looking to retire. And that's sort of the process we follow, just his really long process to try and get to retirement. Junior is the Gemini project. That's why it's called Gemini Man. He's the other one. And as we know, the Gemini star sign is 2 guys, or 2 people. And so he is the other version. And he is basically the sort of start of the Super Soldier project, but he's not quite there. Danny, she is the spy that's sent to spy on Henry, played by Mary Winstead, great performance, and she basically decides that she's going to throw away the life she's always known and go on the run with Henry, because she believes he is a true patriot to the United States and shouldn't be in so much trouble of people trying to kill him. Baron, played by Benedict Wong, he is the pilot who helps them travel around. And he is one of Henry's old war buddies, and he basically wants to help try and save Henry's life and get to the bottom of what the Gemini project is, because they both know, as Clay Verris was both their sergeants, that he's a bit of a dodgy guy and not a very nice guy either. As I've said, Clay Verris, played by Clive Owen, he is the head of the Gemini project. Not too much more to tell about him other than he's pretty dark, and he wants to make super soldiers so that America has an advantage upon every other country in the world. I'll go into that in a bit more depth later. Yuri Kovacs, one scene only, but quite an important character, played by Isla Vollet, and he basically just tells Henry what the Gemini project is. And Jack Willis, again, played by Douglas Hodge, he's just another information guy, but quite an important bit because he really sets the film off. So, some of the themes, just to run through these quickly, I don't want to make the video too long, is fear. Fear is a key theme throughout this film. You know, Junior's fear, Henry's fear. They both share similar fears. The main one is drowning, but also Henry has a lot of ghosts. He mentions this in the film, you know, like he says when he saw Junior, it was like every trigger he ever pulled. So he says like these ghosts almost haunt him, every man he's ever killed, every person he's ever killed. And I think we see that he's quite not an emotive character, because he certainly is an emotive character, but you can see that things are bothering him, there's trauma hanging over his head all the time. And he's trying to help Junior escape those feelings of fear. Seeing the ghost, like I said, that's basically when he sees Junior, he feels like he can see his whole life standing in front of him, and all the mistakes he's going to make that he doesn't want this poor kid to make as well after he's been cloned from him. Only knowing war, that sort of relates to Henry's character. He's never really had much joys in life, it doesn't seem. He's had a bit of a rough upbringing, and he just sort of takes war as the first thing he's good at, and he just follows it for his whole life until he retires, and never really seems to have anybody in his life that he can ultimately trust until this happens. Then he sees who his true friends are. Cloning, now this is why I said it was the realistic sci-fi film, because obviously we have the clone of Junior and we have the clone of Junior again, where he's been tampered with to be a super soldier. So this is why it's a realistic sci-fi film, because it's very much in the modern day, and the only thing that's a bit science fiction about it is being able to clone a human being to the point of super soldiery. However, Claveris makes one fair point, which is he says, why should American people have to die? Why should American fathers, sons, daughters, mothers have to die in wars when we can send these super soldiers who know nothing but war? They have no emotion, no pain, they're faster, they're stronger, they're more tactile. Why shouldn't we send these people? And basically Henry's sort of response is that you're playing with people, you're playing God, and that's not fair. You know, you have to let people make choices. And the other aspect of what Henry's saying is that humans fight war because you need that human element. That's what he says, you know, the trauma, the judgment, the decision of whether to take a life is quite important, and if you just send these super soldiers, they'll just kill everyone that stands in their path, whether it be civilian or an actual enemy. And he says that's not really fair. You know, you need that human element to decide who is the target here. And the chance for a new life, that's very much surrounding Junior. He's got the opportunity to escape and have a new life. And then finally I'm going to discuss about the special effects, and this is basically the effect that I'm mainly going to focus on, is the effect to make Will Smith look younger. Now this has been done really, really well in this film, especially for something that's sort of at the forefront. I remember seeing it in Star Wars Rogue One with Grand Moff Tarkin, and they've done a similar effect on Will Smith here. Now it does look really good for the majority of the film. However, at points it gets a bit cartoonish, and I'm not blaming that on them. I just don't think the technology is 100% there yet for me personally. It's a very fast moving film, and it's got a good pace. You don't really feel like it is a 2-hour film. Other than that, the other general special effects, you know, they're good. You know, as we expect nowadays from a big Hollywood blockbuster. You know, all the grenades and gunfire and fight scenes and motorbike chases and all that type of stuff. The special effects are really good, the explosions. So they've done a really great job of bringing it all together for the big screen and making that cinema experience. So overall, I'd probably give this film a 4 out of 5. This is mainly because some of the fight scenes for me didn't quite work, and I think that's because they've had to be filmed twice with Will Smith, and it just, at some points, it looked a bit like he wasn't really hitting him, and it just didn't quite land. The tech for the CGI faces I don't think is quite there yet, but it is a very enjoyable film, and if you're a big fan of Will Smith, what can be better than 2 Will Smiths? So go and see the film. I would definitely recommend it. I definitely advise going to see it. You know, it's right on the forefront of cinema technology, and this might be the way forward for extending actors' careers by trying to fit them into younger roles using the CGI. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you like what I've had to say. There'll be plenty more on the way. So have a good day.